This program will inform and educate viewers on the underlying reasons behind many of today's grim and troubling events. You know what makes you mad? You know that there are bad things coming just over the horizon. You watch and listen to lots of podcasts and blogs that give their opinions on what's wrong and what's to come. But nobody is talking about what comes next.
All right.
Well, hi, baby. Flag me up. What a fun day we're going to have. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Okay. So we're going to talk about DOGE, which I realize that everybody's talking about DOGE, but I see it differently. I think, as the thumbnail on this particular podcast says, this is our last chance to avoid being Venezuela. I will explain that, and then I'm going to explain why DOGE is the Democratic Party's best chance to survive. They're just simply not getting the message. And there's a way to come down on this, to be on the side of reasonability and still oppose the Republicans in a genuine way. But we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so here's what Musk is doing. If you were to be called in, let's say that hypothetically that you are a turnaround artist, which by the way I was. So I used to own a company called HK Turnaround. And what we did is we were usually invited by the bankers or the lenders or the shareholders. We would go into companies that were failing and turn them around. Now, usually what happens when you go into a failing enterprise is that there's a lot of money going out the door and nobody knows where it's going. Sometimes it's being stolen. There's an awful lot of fraud. And sometimes it's just being horribly misdirected. But one way or the other, how do you find out what that is? And almost always when you go into those situations, the books are all screwed up. Well, that could all be said is true of USAID. And the reason that Trump picked it to go at first and Musk went after it is because it's low-hanging fruits. And it's a really good beginning point, but it's just the beginning point. So let me tell you what they're doing. So you walk into the company, you're taking it over. You're walking to USAID, you're taking it over. The first thing you do is you stop paying the bills, because that's how you get a really good idea of how money's being spent. Because pretty soon, the people that were promised money by the company, or in this case, the entity, start showing up and saying, "Where's our check?" And then you get to say, "Your check for what?" And then they get to say, "For doing this or that or the other thing." And then you get to figure out whether or not this is something that has anything to do with what the company should be doing. So if you think about Elon Musk, think about when he took over X, okay, formerly Twitter. So he goes into the company, and this is a true story. He walks into the office building in San Francisco, and it's empty because everybody's working from home. Yet in the cafeteria, they're still preparing gourmet meals. They hired gourmet chefs in San Francisco to come in, and they were spending, it came out to $845 per employee that didn't show up to cook lunch that they then simply threw in the garbage. They didn't even bother to donate it to local food banks, which would have been at least understandable. But no, that's not what they did. They just threw it out. And that was just one example of the enormous waste going on. So what Elon Musk did on the first day is stop paying the bills. Then the creditors began showing up, and then they began to understand where the money was being spent. And then yada, 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 here we are today. And he fired 80% of the staff. And today, X is the greatest tech turnaround in history, is profitable, and is worth a lot of money. And who would have thought that was true during the time that this was all going on? But that's how you do it. It's basically zero-sum accounting. You stop paying the bills when you first take over. You see who's presenting bills, and then from there you make a decision. Well, that's exactly what they've done in USAID. And what they've determined is, first of all, you've seen all the examples, $100,000 going for this and $1 million going for that. And they're all stupid things. And the Democrats foolishly are trying to defend this as like some kind of a threat to world order, when clearly what the USAID is a slush fund. Okay, it's a slush fund, and it was created not by Congress, despite what you're hearing. It was created by executive order, and so since it was created by executive order, I want to say it was created in 1992 or 3. President Clinton did it by executive order. So anything done by executive order can be undone by executive order. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's number one. But to get to the point of the thumbnail, why this is our last chance, let's take a step back for a moment. Let's not argue about individual expenditures, which, by the way, their defense is always, well, that's a rounding error. If you shut down all of USAID, it doesn't really come to that much money. This is how cavalier these people are with taxpayer money. So let me explain to you that based on our current national debt of around 37 to 38 trillion dollars, increasing at the rate of $1 trillion every 90 days, each and every American, not working American, each and every American is right now on the hook. I did the math before we went on the air. $180,000 each. Each one of us, if you divide the national debt by 340 million people, we have blown over $180,000. Let's just say that on programs that, I don't know. Let's say you have a family of four. That means that theoretically you're on the hook for $720,000 of the national debt. That would be your share, taxpayer. Do you feel like you've gotten $720,000 of benefit from any of this? Do you feel that way, Eric?
Not at all, bro. It's
Okay.
terrible.
And a lot of this is interest expense. Now, what happens, anyone who has been in tough financial times has robbed Peter to pay Paul. In other words, used one credit source to pay for another credit source. The ultra wealthy and the people who are born lucky haven't done it, but almost everyone else at some point in their life plays that game. But you have to get off that train right away, because an idiot could tell you that when you borrow money to pay money that you borrow, the interest is going to start compounding. And that's what's going on with the national debt. But the only reason we haven't gone bankrupt as a country is that we have a Federal Reserve. So what happens is the Treasury gets the bill from the departments for how much money they need, which is just insane. They actually are supposed to spend more anyway. We all know they're pissing away a lot of money. I could go into the weeds on this, but I'm not going to. The Treasury gets the bill from the agency or the group or whatever that is on the government hook. And by the way, here's an interesting fact. Nobody knows how many agencies the government has. Nobody knows. It's somewhere. It could be 450 to 4,500. Nobody knows. I mean, just think of how absurd that is. No one knows where the money's going. And we're all on the hook for this to the tune of 100, call it 200 G's each, because it's building fast. And now it's every 90 days we add $1 trillion. But because of the interest that we're paying on the debt that compounds, because we can't even pay the interest, we have to borrow that too. Pretty soon it'll be 80 days, then 70 days, then 60, 50, 40. And at some point, it will all collapse out from under us. And what is happening in Venezuela will happen to us. This is exactly every welfare state that's ever been attempted. Every socialist experiment that's ever been attempted always ends this way. Okay, up until now, and we have one more chance. Up until now, we were doomed and destined to enter a hyperinflation, as is all of Europe and most of the world, because everybody is doing the same stupid thing. Now, what Trump has done, because he's a populist, and populism is a dangerous thing, because what it means is the politician is reflecting the popular will. And sometimes the masses are asses, and sometimes the popular will should be educated at the very least and put aside. But in this case, the popular will, which is all of us were sick of watching all of our money go out the window with nobody knows where it's going. This is a very popular thing that Trump's doing. He's riding a wave. This is why it's our last chance. Trump showed up in the nick of time. Okay. And yes, Democrats, don't get impatient with me. I'm going to tell you how to save your party. Just stay with me. So, one by one, department by department, the next one's going to be Department of Education. They're going to do this exact same thing. But I was back to how we got into trouble. So the Treasury gets the bill. Then they issue Treasury bonds, which is trying to borrow money from the public markets. There aren't enough people to buy all the bonds we're issuing, so the Federal Reserve buys the rest. But the Federal Reserve has no money, so how do they do it? They print the money. So this is how this feeds inflation, because when you start issuing a lot of money just to pay interest, it works its way back into the economy, and it ends up being too much money chasing too few goods. Inflation is always caused by monetary policy, 100% of the time. And we're in a trap, because we have to print this to cover the bills that we've committed to, and we have to get it under control. And Trump is doing exactly the right thing, and he's acting very fast, because he knows that all glory is fleeting. He's going to have maybe he'll have a year to do this, maybe he'll get 2 years, but eventually, if it doesn't come through, we're going to end up right now. We're in a great situation because the economy overall is good. Okay, and unemployment's only at 4%, and while all of us are losing ground to inflation, most of us still have our jobs, and there's a big difference between losing ground to inflation and being flat broke because most people can't handle a $500 emergency. So, for example, this week I needed tires on my car, and fully installed, that was about $680. Yeah, I got a special on Pirellis, and I drive a Subaru. It's just little tires, but anyway. How many people, and I just wrote a check for it because I'm fortunate enough to have a cash flow that allows me to do that. But how many people really can? And that's why they finance the tire. That's why there's so much personal debt. But I don't want to get too caught in that. But the government can just print money. It doesn't have to borrow more. But eventually, since there's nothing behind the money, it will collapse. And inflation is a collapse of the value of the currency. Okay, that's what inflation is. So, like in Venezuela today, they're running inflation. They almost can't measure it. It's in the thousands of percent a month because the government keeps printing money and to pay the bills for the things that they have to pay, and there's no way out. They're in a trap. The only way out is to default, which ultimately is what everyone has to do. But Trump has presented a third alternative through DOGE. And that alternative is we're discovering in USAID as being the first test case that there is a minimum of 20% sheer waste in their budget. So if you look at USAID's budget, I want to say it's somewhere around $50 billion a year, which, again, the defense that the Democrats make for trying to defend this is that that's a rounding error on a $7 trillion budget. They're right, it is, but that's so cavalier. That's like saying, well, you little people, you don't understand. $50 billion is nothing. We can waste that, and no one will ever. What are they talking about? Well, what they're really talking about is all of those programs in there are actually political payoffs to the people that make campaign contributions. And both parties are guilty of this. This is why the Republicans, until Donald Trump, are on the wrong side of this too. Donald Trump is a political phenomenon. Love him or hate him, that's what he is. So we've discovered there's about 20% of waste, and then there's another 20% of sheer stupidity. So if we carry that out and we project that into the general budget, that means we run a $2 trillion deficit per year. We don't have to pay off the $37 trillion. We simply have to stop it from growing and then grow the economy so that the overall debt is less a percentage.
Let's say that again. You said that a little too fast, so slow that down into
Okay, so
building
let me use an
blocks.
example. Let's say that our country is a house, just to make it real simple. And the house is worth $1 million. But somehow we've managed to borrow we've borrowed $2 million against our $1 million house. We're in big trouble. But if we can grow the value of the house over time, do some improvements, grow it over time, and at the same time get our spending under control and be able to service the interest, give it enough time, the value of the house will if we can freeze the debt at 2 million, the value of the $1 million house will grow to where it becomes worth more than the debt, and then the debt is no longer a problem because you have enough assets to pay it off, at least on paper. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, so we don't have to pay down the $37 trillion debt. We're never going to pay down the $37 trillion debt. What we have to do is and by the way, the only president that ever presided over a government not in debt was Andrew Jackson. That's a trivia question, but we're always in debt, but we've never been in debt like this. This is insane debt. So what we need to do is grow the economy. Now, the projections under the last administration, under the Biden administration, was that the economy would grow at 1.5% per year. Meanwhile, his spending was out of control. This was an unsustainable path. What Trump is saying is, and he's right, if you do the math, I've done it for you. You don't have to do it. But if Trump can double the growth of the economy to 3%, which he'll do by renewing the Trump tax cuts, that's very important. Again, get the thought out of your mind, my Democrat friends, that this is between rich and poor. Let me just take a little short break, little tangent, and tell you that traditionally you Democrats have been the party of the working man, but now what you are is the party of Wall Street, because inflation helps the ultra rich. You guys talk a good game about how you want to help the little man and how you're protecting the workers, but actually, the Workers' Party is now the Republicans because they actually care about inflation. But when you just keep spending money with nothing, you have caused inflation, and rich people, because they own things like real estate and stocks, those things appreciate in an inflation. So you're making the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's what's responsible for this. That's the irony. And that's why the Democrats don't seem to understand what trouble they're in. They've become the party of the oligarchy, and all they do is talk about destroying it. They are the oligarchy. And the Republicans under Trump, because he brought populism in, populism by definition is the workers. Workers, the masses, are the population. Populism,
Mm.
population. Does that make sense to you, Eric?
Yeah, that's a good twist right there. And
Okay, so
Democrats are focusing on the wrong thing.
totally the wrong thing, but they have an opportunity. I'm going to get to their opportunity in a minute, but I want to say how Trump could save the day here. So if he's at the same time he's doing all these other things. I can honestly say I think Trump has done more in 3 weeks than most presidents do in 2 terms. I can't think of. I don't think Reagan did this much in his 2 terms as Trump has in the first 3 weeks. And I lived through Reagan, and I have enormous respect for Reagan, but what Trump's doing is way, way beyond that. Okay, so basically, unlike politicians traditionally who make a lot of campaign promises and then get into office and start explaining why they can't do it, Trump is doing it. And that's what makes him very unique and freaks out the people who are used to doing it the old way. Plus, they all have a vested interest in the oligarchy. And that's particularly the Democrat Party. But let's go back. What we've discovered in USAID is not only we're transforming from a bureaucracy to a kleptocracy. There is a lot of fraud going on. A lot of these payments that are being made on behalf. All you have to do is give something a pretty name, like aid to African countries to prevent AIDS. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you want to funnel the money to your friends, they create something called an NGO, which is a non-governmental organization that then gets paid to reduce AIDS in Africa. And after that, the government has no idea what happens to the money, and most of it never gets anywhere near Africa. It goes into the pockets of the people at the NGOs. That's what I'm talking about, fraud. And I'm not exaggerating. That's what's going on at USAID. And so don't be fooled by pretty names. You can put a pretty name on anything, but it's still horrible no matter what you call it. So don't be fooled. Try to be a little more critical than that. So if he can, so what he's been doing while he's doing all this stuff that's causing all the attention is he's been deregulating like a madman. Most of these executive orders he's signing are repealing the tens of thousands of regulations put on by the Biden administration that had massively disrupted the economy. Now, by doing that alone and renewing his tax cuts, and then he's going to eliminate the tax on tips and eliminate the tax on Social Security for seniors who work, which is great. And all that does is put more money in the pocket of people to spend and therefore grow the economy faster instead of wasting it in the government. Do you get that, Eric?
Yeah, and then there's the cut of the employees, right?
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to expenses in a minute. First, he's going to double the growth of the economy from 1.5% to at least 3%, and maybe as much as 5%. Now, if you double the growth of the economy, now you're on a better trajectory as long as you get the debt not to be growing at the same rate. And to do that, that's where the cuts come in. So, if you take a look at the deficit annually is $2 trillion, give or take a nickel right now. It's growing because of interest. But if Trump can grow the economy faster and stop the growth of the debt, and it's going to, if we've already discovered now through DOGE that 20% of the federal budget is being literally wasted, and another 20% is being literally stolen. So if we can recoup the substantial portion of that 40% of the budget, well, the overall budget is about 7 trillion each year. So 40% of 7 trillion is 2.8 trillion, and we only have to get the 2 trillion to stop the trajectory of growth of the debt and to eliminate the deficit. Our budget would be in balance, and we can do that relatively painlessly, and the only one who's going to pay a price are the bureaucrats. But the bureaucrats are no longer bureaucrats, they're kleptocrats, as in kleptomaniac. And they're so used to stealing and they're so cavalier about it that it's become institutionalized. And that's what DOGE is fighting. And when he goes into now, Department of Education is going to get shut down because the other question you have to ask is what does any of the spending do for the United States? And since the Department of Education came into being in the late 1970s, education has only gotten worse, and there's no one who can possibly dispute that. So they're just going to shut it down. It's performing no useful function. Now you're going to
Mhm.
hear a lot of screaming and yelling about with a lot of pretty names. What about Project Head Start? What about Project this? None of them work. It's all bullshit. It's just pretty names on failing programs that are really political payoffs because maybe a few lunches get to the kids, but most of it is eaten up by the donors who own the companies producing the lunches. Does that make sense to you, Eric?
Oh yeah, yeah. You're hitting it hard right now.
Okay, well, that's Trump. It's just auditing through the government line by line, and these young kids, so to speak. I love the guy named Balls. We need more
Yeah.
balls. You know what
Big
I mean?
balls.
But
He was big balls, not just balls.
I'm sorry, big balls. Sorry, big balls. Um, I love that, but I just love that. So what they're doing is that they're not looking at anybody's data. Everyone can relax. No one's harvesting data. That is just a made up bullshit thing that the Democrats are trying in desperation. They're not even curious about your data. All they're looking at is line item expenditures. And the reason they want to have access to the accounting records is because that's how do you know how much is being spent? And then line by line, they're eliminating all the waste, which terrifies the bureaucracy because they're now a kleptocracy. Make
So
sense?
let's pause. So if you had your own personal budget and you
Mhm.
went in to help someone that's like, I'm really struggling, what would be the first thing you say? What are you spending your money on? And then you
Yeah.
would
Well, the
say,
first
let's open up your bank account and say
and
your debit card
let's
is
find
at
out.
Starbucks and I see
Well,
$85 at Starbucks.
most people, when they get in trouble, and you know this, and I know this, because when we were younger, we were guilty of it. We don't even like to look at what we're spending. You know what I mean? No one, they don't look at their account. The first thing you have to do is go at it line by line. You're right, Eric. That's exactly right. To determine what's really, I mean, how many Starbucks coffees are you buying? Well, the government, not only do they not do that, but they give the money to the guy that owns the Starbucks who's making campaign contributions to them. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
that's the fraud. Okay, that's what the fraud is. It doesn't look like fraud because they've made it look legal, but it is fraud because of the conflicts of interest involved. It's how people like Nancy Pelosi can enter government and suddenly be worth $180 million when she came into it not worth anything. It's how Joe Biden, who's never practiced law a day in his life, is worth over $40 million. Okay, the last election, Trump lost legally, but absolutely it was fixed, and it was fixed because of the Hunter Biden laptop, and they did that because if Biden would have lost, this accounting would have already gone on. This is what they've been fearing all along. You know, when you're a criminal, the last thing you want is an auditor to come in. That's what all this is. Now,
Hmm.
are we clear on why? So, if Trump can simply grow the economy, well, it's not that simple, but if he can grow the economy faster and then take out just the waste and fraud, which means that the genuine benefits that people are receiving, they should still receive. And by the way, when he says don't touch Social Security or Medicare, I beg to differ. They've got to touch, in my opinion, and you tell me what you think about this, Eric. Social Security disability is a giant fraud machine. Let's put aside old age benefits. Let's just forget that for a minute. Let's just talk about the people who are not 63 or 65 and are collecting Social Security because they have a chronic condition or illness, and some of them are getting three. And I mean, I know some of these people, and they're about as disabled as I am. Do you understand what I'm saying, Eric?
Oh, I
They've
see.
manipulated the. I know a guy who, because of headaches, which he attributes to post-traumatic stress disorder, because he did a tour in Iraq, in like Gulf One when Bush was in office. He's all this time has been living off the government. They bought homes, they have cars, they bought an RV. There's so much fraud going on in social. It's unbelievable. Okay, we've got to go through and see who's getting checks and find out are they get look. For example, I'm not on Social Security disability, and I'm not even going to try, but I could because I just had the bottom lobe of my right lung removed, and I could make a great case and get more money than I'm getting, but it would just be such a lie because obviously I'm able to operate.
Mhm.
So you see what I'm saying, Eric? There's just a lot of fraud, and no
Right.
one has to lose legitimate benefits And the people that are freaking out are the ones that know that they're collecting it for no reason.
And then,
Now,
so are vets in that? Or is the
no.
Pentagon funding in that?
Oh, yeah, the Pentagon, yes. Veterans, no. So let me explain that. The VA hospital system under Trump the last time got to be excellent, and it's really slid. I know because I'm a user. It's slid in quality, but hopefully Trump will bring it back up. But the VA itself, the veterans, at least the hospital system, is a tight ship. They run a really tight ship, and I've seen again. I can see that firsthand. However, that's only because Trump got his hands on it last time,
Hmm.
and when you're not the military now, it's not just DEI is going to get rid of. So, for example, in World War II, there were six, count them, six four-star generals. Today, there are 44. Now, we're
44.
not fighting a world war. I swear to God, that's true. Look it up. Why do we have 44 four-star generals? What? These are political generals. These are generals that have never seen combat. These are guys that have gotten to where they are by kissing ass, and they're all going to get fired. That you can kiss them goodbye. And yes, they are going into the Pentagon, and they're going to start looking at when you build a, when you're building, let's say, the F-35. Okay, why are we building it in 18 different states? Why are we sourcing? And is there any competitive bidding going on? And is there any attempt to do it in one geographic location to save shipping and transport and energy costs, which are enormous?
So
I
back
mean,
to Starbucks, right? We're paying
back to Starbucks.
the companies, they're getting a little lick of the ice cream, and we're
They're
using
donors.
your.
It's all about it's congressional districts. To make this plane, you've got to use this Friggle Fram made in Congressman Jones's congressional district. That's all it is, and that it's every single. It's why toilet seats cost $100 in the military. It's why light bulbs are $100. It's because these are legal. They look legal, like they're paying a bill presented, and that looks legal until you realize the company that's selling the light bulb or the toilet seat is a
As a
donor
donor.
to one or the other party. And both parties have done this. I'm not just pointing my fingers at Democrats. Traditionally, Republicans were the big business party and Democrats were the little guy party. And it's just completely shifted because of populism and Donald Trump. Now, Democrats, now I'm going to get down to how to save your party. Are we ready for that, Eric? Or should we do our
Well,
commercial message? And then
yeah,
when I come back, we'll talk about how to save the Democrat Party. What do you think?
yeah. Let's take a break. Let's do that. We'll be right
Okay,
back.
let's go to our commercial message.
Ugh, this air conditioner isn't working again. I'm roasting in here.
Hi there. I'm from Canaloo Air. I'm here to fix your air conditioner.
Canaloo Air is a family-owned HVAC company that specializes in residential air conditioning and heating. We offer a variety of services, including installation, replacement, repair, and maintenance. Canaloo Air. We keep your home comfortable all year round. Call us today for a free quote. Why Canaloo Air? Here are the top 5 reasons. Family-owned and operated. We are committed to high-quality service. Our technicians use the highest quality parts and equipment. The business is a member of the Home Advisor Elite Service Award program. And finally, we have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Visit our website, canilooair.com, or call us today, 602-609-3480.
Window tint isn't just about keeping a low profile anymore. Introducing XPEL Prime XR Plus, the most technologically advanced automotive window film ever created. Prime XR Plus features multi-layer nanoparticle technology designed to provide unrivaled performance. The unique multi-layer construction blocks up to 98% of infrared heat, keeping your vehicle's interior cool no matter the weather. Prime XR Plus also provides superior UV rejection so you and your passengers stay safe from harmful cancer-causing rays. In the past, the only option was installing a darker shade. With Prime XR Plus, you can reap the benefits from our lightest tint to our darkest without compromising performance for visibility. With a digital world, clear communication is key. Unlike other high IR blocking window films, Prime XR Plus won't interfere with cell, radio, or data signal transmissions. Performance at its best. It's prime time. XPEL Prime XR Plus. Ask for it by name today.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants.
Hey, welcome back. You know, I got to tell you, I love Pure 5 extraction. It's the best. I just thought I'd do that. I'm feeling a little goofy. Anyway, okay, we're back. Obviously, I'm feeling goofy for more than one reason. Eric, baby, shall we go into how to save the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think this is a
Eric?
good transition.
Okay, so here we are. So I've set up what DOGE is doing. I've set up what's going on. I've explained why the Republicans are now the working man's party and the Democrats are now the party of the oligarchs. But Democrats, you can't win with that. So you killed yourself in the last election. I'm just going to talk to you frankly as a friend. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I'm a libertarian. Now, I think there's a golden opportunity here for you guys to save your party in a genuine way, in a way that you can actually defend what you're talking about and stay true to the core principles of classical liberalism. Okay, so number one, the word liberal, as is used today, means leftist, but actually, what people call the term libertarian was invented because the left stole liberal. Liberal really means libertarian. And what that means is that the government should be as small as possible, and what you do with your body is entirely your affair, which plays well with the pro-choice. And what it doesn't do is deny objective reality. Now, the problem is that your party has an infection. And there are a lot of Democrats, like my family and like a lot of people I know, who are Democrats because they grew up in the Democratic Party, their parents were in the Democratic Party, their parents' parents were in the Democrat because they were working people, and they just feel alienated by the progressives in the Democratic Party, the people who say there's more than two genders, the people who want to regularize mental illness, the people who want to cancel people and restrict your First Amendment rights, the people who oppose your Second Amendment rights. All those things are that's progressivism, not liberalism. So here's my suggestion, Democrats. Purge the progressives. Let them start their own party. That's what the Greens are in Europe. Let them go be the Greens. Let them go off and be socialists. Let them start the American Socialist Party. Let them call themselves whatever they want. You free yourself from the anchor of socialism that has put us where we are. Okay? And instead, become the party of your founder, Thomas Jefferson, and the hero of the Democratic Party, Andrew Jackson, who's on the $20 bill. Those of you who don't know what he looks like, so you do know what he looks like. You may just not have realized who he was. Those two figures are the two key figures in the history of the Democratic Party. And I know the temptation here when I say this, Democrats, because you've been so propagandized by all this racial tension crap. Yes, both of these men owned slaves, but in the context of when they did this, which was prior to 1830, this was the norm worldwide. So let's not expect that men of their time are going to somehow have the social vision of men of our time, okay? And when I say men, those of you who are now clutching at straws, I mean that mankind, male and female. There's no other genders. That's it. There's male and female and people with a terrible self-loathing medical condition that needs to be treated. That's it. That's what there is. Okay, back on track. So, Andrew Jackson, for example, vehemently opposed the Federal Reserve, at the time was the Bank of the United States, and shut it down. So what you Democrats should do is become the advocate to shut down the Fed. We don't need it. Putting money in control of the government has been what's put us in this position. So you can advocate that because it is true to your Jacksonian roots. It's Thomas Jefferson believed the government should be almost nothing. He believed in now. He was also very practical. That's why he made the Louisiana Purchase, which was a huge government purchase and expanded the territory of the United States. But that's a practical judgment. Overall, Thomas Jefferson was extremely in favor of what now would be called unpopularly states' rights. Well, You can read. You're Jeffersonian. Okay, this is what you have to be, liberals, not progressives. Am I making myself clear, Eric?
Yeah, you're making it kind of difficult, but
Okay.
you got
Okay.
to
So
get a little
let
clearer.
me give you a little bit more. Abortion. Let's go to a hot issue today. Keep the pro-choice position. Most Americans, about 70% of Americans are pro-choice. However, about 70% of Americans think abortion is killing a child. So the obvious that means that most people are pro-choice and they're very uncomfortable with it because of the nature of what abortion is. But Democrats can be pro-choice and be reasonable at the same time. We're pro-choice, but when the fetus becomes viable, we concede that there shouldn't be any abortion. Now everybody wins. It's
Hmm.
stop being the party of idiocy and start being the party of classical liberalism, the party that protects private property, the party that believes that when it comes to welfare, which I know a lot of Democrats believe in things like that, you should advocate that welfare is done at the state level, because that way the governments and the local governors and the local governments can design welfare programs that work for the population that was in their state. Does that make sense, Eric?
Yeah, and what about immigration?
On immigration, you would then take the side of sane immigration instead of shutting down the border. What Trump is doing now is uncomfortable for a lot of people, even those of us who support it, because the truth is we're not sending out the police to round up people is not really an American concept. Now, I understand while we're trying to round up the approximately 300,000 convicted criminals among the 20 million or so illegal aliens in the United States, that's fine. But they're talking about then broadening the net, and we should be opposed to that. Okay, those of us who are classical liberals should say, you know what? Not only should we oppose that, we need immigrants, and what we need to do is make the immigration system sane. So the position of the Democratic Party could be declare an amnesty without a path to citizenship on a certain date, so that there's no one who can take advantage of it by trying to get in after the date. Do you see what I'm saying, Eric? You got to.
Right. No retro. Just it is what it is. They
And then be in favor of removing immigration quotas, be in favor of automatic green cards to foreign students at American universities that graduate, so that to give them an incentive to stay in the United States, and become an advocate for not open immigration, but smart immigration, because our birth rate is so low that we will not be able to maintain the social safety net unless we expand the population. And our population, there's no magical way the government can make women have more children. So the only other solution is immigration, and that should be the Democratic position. That Trump is going too far. Yes, we need to round up the murderers and the rapists, and so you can cooperate and oppose at the same time, guys. You don't have to dig your heels in and everything is bad that the orange man does, right? No, you say, look, the part where you're rounding up the rapists, we're all for it. That's why a lot of Democrats voted for this. I forget the name of the bill.
the likely or
Was
Lakely?
I think it was Lakin, wasn't it?
Lakin.
Lycan? Well, anyway, that bill, we all know what we're talking about.
Right.
I think
Riley.
Yeah,
We
Lakin.
got that
I
right.
almost positive it was Lakin Riley. But anyway, that bill passed with a lot of Democratic votes. For example, it got 77 yay votes in the Senate. That's the stuff the Democrats should say, yes, 100% of us are on board with that. And let the nutcases, the progressives who oppose all of that, let them go form a progressive party. Let them break away. Every now and then in American history, parties go away. I'll give you the best example. The easiest one is Abraham Lincoln, basically, along with a group of other men, started the Republican Party and broke away from the Whigs over slavery at the time.
Mhm.
And the Whigs were the biggest party. And where are they today? Gone.
Right.
So the Democrats, as they're now configured, should become classical liberals and let the progressives break away. Let them go away and form. Maybe they'll call it social democratic. Maybe they'll call it socialist. Maybe they'll call it green. Let them call it whatever they want. Let them argue idiocy. That's the other thing. You got to get on climate. Let's talk about the position you should take on climate. Your position should be, sooner or later we're going to have to curtail our use of fossil fuels, but we fully support nuclear energy. The only reason that you guys, it's the cleanest energy available. It's how you can win both ways. By encouraging and removing the regulations necessary to build nuclear power plants, America could have 100% clean energy that never runs out, and everybody's happy because it's available on demand, not just when the wind blows or the sun shines. Does that
Hmm.
make sense, Eric?
Yeah. And then the same thing of the EVs and all that crap.
EVs are great. And you can advocate for EVs, but you don't believe the government should impose EVs. And putting EVs aside, get on. It's time to start to understand what AI is. That's going to be a big issue. And open and closed source AI. And you guys should be the guys that only support open source AI. In other words, it's free. It's like Google. It's open to everybody to use for free, as opposed to a like. Well, I'll use Safari. Safari, the Apple browser doesn't work on my computer because they have a version of it now for but it works like shit, right? In other words, it should be like Google. It's everywhere for everybody. The reason so many people think they hate Google is because Google does their job so well. You know, I mean
Hmm.
and they give it away, most of it.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying, Eric?
Right.
It's AI could be a great issue for Democrats if they advocate for open source. Am I clear? Eric, you got to be
Yeah.
in the audience for me. Am
Yeah.
I being clear on that?
Yeah. We're being
Yeah.
clear on that. Hmm.
Yeah, so this guy Sam Altman who wants to take his AI and make it closed source, we should oppose that if we're classical liberals. But what Elon Musk is doing with XAI, which will be open source, we should support that. Stop looking for a villain. Instead, look at the policies. I'm pretending
Yeah.
I'm a classical liberal that's a Democrat, should be supporting that kind of thing.
But I want to
Absolutely based
add,
on,
you can go
pardon
to
me?
this the trip, what NASA was trying to do, bloated, this, that, and the other. And then it's like, why don't the Democrats just support privatizing space travel?
Well, and it's that's you bring up another good point. Musk is going into he sent his team into the transportation department in the FAA. I'm telling you, as a licensed pilot, the technology they're using in those towers, and I've seen it with my own eyes many times, was last overhauled in 1986. How can you be opposed to the overhaul and the efficiency of a better system that's brand new using AI to control air traffic? So these that helicopter would have never been at 300 feet with a decent air control system. Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying, Eric?
Yeah.
So you should support that because as long as it's not being done by the state, that's Jacksonian and Jeffersonian. And it doesn't matter that Republicans support it too, because they're going to go off on crazy tangents. They're really big into, getting into people's private lives. That's the other thing. You guys should stop rejecting religion, but start talking about, because acknowledge that most classical liberals are agnostic, but instead replace it with a healthy philosophy, like, for example, Stoicism, that you literally adopt as one of the governing philosophies of the Democratic Party, because you understand that you can't replace something with nothing. And the problem with progressivism is that it's a cult, and the difference between the difference between a cult and a religion is religion offers redemption. Cults never offer redemption. They're just nihilistic, cynical positions that this is why people who's, like, for example, are fanatical on climate change won't even discuss the science. They won't even discuss it. They won't even enter a debate. That's not a scientist, that's a cultist. And they're trapped there. There's nothing we could do to make them come out of that. That's a cult. Religions offer redemption. Well, you could offer the exact same thing through philosophy and help America get back on track to its moral values that it once held without being preachy, like the Republicans are going to get preachy. They're
Yeah.
already preachy. So you can go to the opposite side of that and still be on the side of right. Does that make sense, Eric?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
You're dropping bars right now.
Look, the Democrats they should take over the Now, there are crazy libertarians too, the anarchists and things like that. Throw them out. Just like you get rid of the progressives. Don't. Anarchism is great on paper, but in real life, there's going to be government. The question is, how do we make it work? Maybe my idea, anti-politism. You can adopt it as your own. We can. There's all kinds of ways to talk about this, but you need to separate yourself without being irrational and idiotic, because the people are on to that. Okay, you should be in favor of massive massive election reform. Okay, you should be absolutely jumping on the bandwagon of new media and just let the old media die. There's a lot of places for the Democratic Party to get really engaged on the side of classical liberalism, and non-intervention. How did the Democratic Party, the party that opposed Vietnam, suddenly become an interventionist party? How is it that Biden was the president of a party shoveling billions that we have no idea where the money went, none whatsoever, into the most corrupt country in Europe? How does that happen with the Democratic Party? Quietly, progressives have morphed your party into the party of the oligarchy by creating inflation, which makes the oligarchs richer because they hold assets, and the average person, the other two-thirds of the country that don't have the assets, just get poorer and poorer, and they keep trying to tell you they're on their side. Let them go to the progressives. Let them be on their side, on that side. Let the progressives be the policy of the unions. You guys be the policy of the workers who just want to get paid for working hard and don't want to be preached to, and their body, they want it to be their own, and don't want to get involved in foreign entanglements, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And, just there are a million other issues we can go down, but do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think how you laid it out is Democrats get to your top 4 pillars and just stay in your lane and don't get involved in the other stuff.
Oh, and I think that you should come out in favor of stopping the drug war. That would be a great Democratic issue, because when it's laid out logically and not with hysteria, every time anyone brings up drug legalization, the next thing is drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are killing 148,000 people. All of that's true. Let the Republicans say that crap. They're screaming and yelling. They're screaming, the house is on fire, the house is on fire, so let's just throw more gasoline on it. Okay, you should be saying, yeah, the house is on fire, but maybe we should look at what's sourcing the fire. Maybe the drug war itself is the fuel that's making the fire grow. Maybe we're enriching the cartels. Maybe we should look at something a little different. Democrats can get a long way with that message, because when people think it through, when rational people think it through, it makes nothing but sense. Does that you see what I'm saying, Eric?
Lots of sense. This is good. Now I think it's time for our speed round. You ready?
Yes, I am done preaching today.
Go ahead. You've dropped so many things. Okay, California wildfires. What's going to happen in that neck of the woods?
Well, in the short term, just to bring people up to speed, and if you're not tracking it, and I track it not only because I'm curious, but because my youngest son lives in Rancho Palos Verdes, which is in Los Angeles. Okay, so it actually concerns my own family. So anyway, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, who, by the way, as a side note, was the other serious contender for Joe Biden than Kamala Harris. Can you imagine if Karen Bass had been running this time? She's worse than Kamala, and that's hard to believe. But anyway,
that's painful.
That's why I tell the Democrats, lose the progressives. These progressives have to just go away. Anyway, Karen Bass, because Trump literally publicly shamed her into it, has at least temporarily gotten rid of a lot of the regulation requirements on the local level. Trump has eliminated the regulation on the federal level, and reconstruction should go fairly efficiently. Now, I don't know what efficiently means. I'm not a builder. I don't want to name timelines. I'm ignorant on that, but as much as it could be, probably in the real world, the rebuilding of the Palisades and Alta Mesa and these areas that have gotten so burned out will probably go pretty well. But the question now becomes how to prevent it. And I think that these fires have fundamentally changed California politics. I think there's suddenly going to be 2 parties in California. I'm not saying the Republicans are going to take charge, but the Democrats are certainly going to lose their supermajority in the state House and Senate, and they're probably going to lose the governorship. And that couldn't come at a better time for California, because they need to clean out the underbrush. They need to bring the water down that's being dumped into San Francisco Bay. Trump is right about that. Someone needs to invent. Trump, by the way, is sicking the Justice Department on that idiotic high-speed rail train. If you want to see what the worst instance of public corruption in history, that's it. They've spent billions of dollars, and they've laid 1 mile of track. And it's not even going to go. It's between Bakersfield and Fresno. I mean, I've talked about it before. I don't want to go on and on. But I think what's going to happen in California is they're going to get some sane government. That's what I think. I'm optimistic for California, because they've pissed off the progressives in Palisades. Suddenly, I don't know if you've noticed it, but have you noticed that the public conversation by the celebrities have gotten much friendlier towards Trump? Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
Just saying.
yeah. I'm just saying.
That's not
Okay,
that's
next
that's not a coincidence. Go ahead.
next thing, FEMA and North Carolina.
Okay, so FEMA is basically, I don't know if you caught the video of this. They're basically saying to the local people, we'll fund it, but we're going to get out of your way. And so the reconstruction of North Carolina is going to go very quickly for the same reasons. And North Carolina has, even though they have a Democratic governor, they have a Republican state legislature, and Trump is funneling money in. But FEMA itself is another agency that's going to get audited, and I suspect that ultimately FEMA is going to go away.
You
I don't.
can,
It's an unnecessary agency. Right now, it's standing out of the way, but it should be completely out of the way, and eventually, I think it will be.
all right, Ukraine and Russia.
So Trump has negotiators there now. Zelensky is getting desperate because the day before yesterday, he demanded nuclear weapons from the United States, which Trump is not going to give him nuclear weapons. You know, just forget it. That's not happening. But that's an expression of desperation. As I've said on previous podcasts, they're out of men. The Russians are in the same position. They're not going to invade anybody else. They're spent, and I think that they're going to. One of the surprises of the first couple of months, not overnight like Trump hyperbolically said he could do, in the first day in office, but here in the next 2 or 3 months, there's going to be a truce, and they're going to basically stop where they started.
Okay, there's a lot of aviation in the news. A lot of planes are crashing, unfortunately. What's the problem? What's going on?
Pilot error. So speaking as just for those of you who don't know, I'm an instrument rated pilot. I've been flying since I was 17. I have over 5,000 hours logged, probably a lot more that I haven't logged, flying all kinds of different planes. So having said that, a perfectly good airplane rarely drops out of the air. Okay, it's the things go wrong in airplanes, but there's a lot of redundancies. Even in the single engine airplanes, there are redundant systems so that if one fails, another one steps in. So I'll give you the example. Remember when John F. Kennedy Jr. was killed in a single engine plane crash
Mm-hmm.
back in the day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he flew that plane into the water. There was nothing wrong with that plane. He got disoriented by flying in pitch black when he wasn't an instrument rated pilot, and he got vertigo and flew the plane into the water. That's a good example of pilot error killing everybody. The accident that took place in Philadelphia is almost certainly pilot error with that jet that nosed in. The accident in Washington, D.C., that helicopter did not have the system turned on that it was mandatory to be turned on. There's a system called TCAS, Terminal Collision Avoidance System, TCAS, and there's a really good military version of that. I forget what the acronym is, but it's required that it be turned on. And had it been turned on as it was required to do, the pilot would have known that she was in imminent danger of collision long before they hit. So this is going to turn out to be yes, there was the control system should have been much more accurate and better. It's going to be there's not going to be one cause, but the primary underlying cause is going to be pilot error.
Okay.
There's just nothing wrong with these planes. They're perfectly safe. I mean, the Learjet that crashed in Philadelphia, right as we're speaking, there's probably 1,000 of them in the air right now. I mean, this is a very, very, very good airplane. But
Yeah.
people are people, and sometimes the pilots do stupid shit, or they fly into conditions that they shouldn't be flying into.
My observation on that Learjet is like
Mhm.
it hit the ground going fast. I mean,
Well, he stalled it out at low altitude. So stalling doesn't mean the engine quits. Stalling means the airplane loses its airfoil. So in other words, the reason the airplanes have wings is so that wind accumulates under the wing, creating lift and lifting the airplane up. And then with flaps, I mean elevators and rudders and ailerons, they can control the airflow and thereby steer the airplane. Well, if your nose angle gets too high, then you don't have enough speed against the wind to fly, and then the airplane just collapses straight in. And that's what happened to that crash. They just stalled into the ground. They were at such low altitude. If that had happened to them at, let's say, 10,000 feet, you would have never known it happened. He would have recovered the stall. But he didn't have time to recover it. And
Gotcha.
that was that.
All right, it's a wrap. Last question. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
Okay, not to prefacing that I don't hate the Kansas City Chiefs the way I hate the Dallas Cowboys. And that's because I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and those of you who are Steelers fans understand me. Um, I'm going with the Eagles, our cross-state rivals in the NFC. I grew up part of the time in Pittsburgh, guys. That's why I'm a Steelers fan. But anyway, long story short, I'm rooting for the Eagles, and largely because one of my oldest friends, no, not one of, the oldest friend I have is a retired physician in Philadelphia, and he and I are going to be talking to each other through the whole game. And if I don't root for the Eagles, I'm going to pay a terrible price for it. That's all I'm saying. So there you go.
There you go. My choice is Kansas City, so we'll see.
You know, Patrick Mahomes is such a class act. You know what I mean? I can't hate the Chiefs, but they're like a juggernaut, and it would be nice to see the Eagles take it. That's just how I. But whatever. I'll be happy either way. I'll be eating wings. That's what I'll be doing.
Lots of wings. All right.
Listen, all of you guys, eat some wings. Have a fun Sunday. Don't worry about this stuff. The good news is, really, we're on a really good track in the nick of time. Let me just reiterate that. The home team is the right team for once, and it's being headed by a really good manager with really good talent, and the team on the field is first rate. And there's going to be a lot of screaming and yelling because there's a lot of corrupt people who have been lining their pockets, but it's going our way. So enjoy the Super Bowl, enjoy life. Democrats, get rid of the progressives, become liberals again. Be liberals again. That's all I'm saying. Be liberals again, but in the classical sense. Okay, have a beautiful week. We'll talk to you next week.